Hello, everybody. It is the Rotoworld Week 10 waivers chat. I am Patrick Daugherty, joined by our waivers guru, Kyle Dvorchak. His waiver wired column is now live on the site. We're going to be talking about these guys all week. We're going to be posting blurbs about them all week. Kyle, it's another kind of lower wattage waivers week. But to me, when I looked at your article, when I just scanned the week 9 fallout, someone stood out as like the ad of the week to me. And I think you agreed. Who would you call the ad of the week for week 10 off the waiver wire?
Yeah, Keaton Mitchell is our ad of the week. He was one of the better UDFA prospects for what it's worth, and then finally comes back from IR a few weeks ago, doesn't get the ball much, and then blows up last week with well over 100 yards. He led the NFL in rushing in week 9 off a few breakout plays, and that all came despite the game being a blowout in regular, meaningful time, non-garbage time performance. I think he gives at least a chance at being the lightning to Gus Edwards' thunder, and certainly someone you want to pick up the way the Ravens offense has played in the past month or so.
Yeah, just it's still a run-based offense. They're ascending now in kind of all phases on offense for the Ravens, where you and I have been joking about I don't really give them enough credit. I'm like, when do the Ravens ever score points? Because they've been like top 6 or 7 in points, but it felt like to me like they all come in bunches, and then they have like 1 or 2 like kind of lower wattage games in a row. That's been going away. 2 or 3 pretty high-powered games in a row, and they've needed a lightning to pair with the Thunder for so long. Like Keaton Mitchell made so much sense. I'm surprised it took this long for it to happen, but it has happened. The thing is with Keaton Mitchell, the only word of caution is that now they have a super tough matchup for Week 10. Like it could be a total slugfest between the Ravens and Browns.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Could just be a total slugfest.
I think they torched the Browns last time they played them, though. Not to say
they
that they're going
did,
to do
but
that again this week.
because DTR started for the Browns was why.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
So that game, actually, I remember that. I think I had that game for blurbs. They had like 10 drives or something that game. 6 of them punts and 4 of them touchdowns. Like the most boom bust. We get the ball, we run all over you and score, or we have run, pass, punt as our game plan. And even one of their scores, I think, was a DTR interception returned for a very long return that set up a 10-yard touchdown or something like that. So you're right that that back score maybe does a little bit of lying. They put up points against a really good defense. Did they deservedly score 28? Skeptical.
See, my big party line, I think, on Keaton Mitchell this week is well worth the waiver wire claim, but it won't be like the best week then to win him and then just jam him into your lineup. You might be in the awkward position of spending a decent amount of your remaining fab on him, winning him, and then not even wanting to play him. So just assess the lay of the land there. We've got some questions rolling in. This isn't really a question, it's more of a comment. SSX3, the Zoomers will not remember SSX. Keaton Mitchell is a god, right? Yep, we're working on that SSX3. It's a very, very funny username. We'll start with a complicated one here from MH1608. Do or die situation. Need to win now. Full PPR, 8-team league, so the teams are going to be pretty stacked. But I'll make a quick comment on smaller league. People make fun of smaller leagues where it's like a different kind of challenge in a small league where every team is stacked, and it becomes really about like hoarding like high-level talent. And then like so much, but your roster decisions are so magnified when the leagues are shallower. So it's actually a different kind of challenge. We can't wait around for Devante Adams. Needs a solid wide receiver or 2 for him that can help me now. Also a receiver or 2 for Josh Jacobs. So first off, are you trying to trade Devante Adams now that things have kind of stabilized? A really disappointing stat line for Devante Adams yesterday. They just didn't need to do anything to beat the pathetic Giants. I feel a little better about his compiling odds with Aiden O'Connell. Problem is they're playing the New York Jets this week. And then they have tough matchups with the Dolphins and Chiefs, but games where they might have to at least to throw. So just begin with, how do you feel about Devante Adams? Are you still trying to unload Devante Adams for whatever you can get, Kyle? Or can we like be actually optimistic about Devante now that Josh McDaniels' reign of terror is over?
Can't tell if I lost Pat or if Pat lost me. I'm going to talk as if Pat is the one who lost. Chat, let me know if you can. He lost you. I don't know if that means as in like he's gone or I'm gone. Chat, can you hear me? Can you see me, chat? Give me ones in the chat if you can see or hear me. He bumped himself out. I'm going to say, I don't know if he lost you means that I'm gone from. Okay, he's frozen. Thank you. That's what I needed. He's frozen. One's in the chat. Pat's frozen. He got his question off. I heard his question, which was our faith in Devante Adams. I mean, I'm obviously concerned that their quarterback play is not going to be good. Aiden O'Connell is just probably not the answer. Of course, one's in the chat. Thank you. One's in the chat. Of course, like what was he, like a 4th or 5th round pick? Most 4th or 5th round quarterbacks don't pan out, as it turns out. And that's okay. Like, that's not an indictment of him. The NFL roughly evaluated him correctly, that he has backup potential. So I'm not too optimistic on this version of the Raiders offense going forward, but to spin it forward to what to do in your fantasy leagues, who the hell is optimistic in this Raiders offense going forward? Like, no one's seeing what Aiden O'Connell is doing. Like, we got to start buying on the Raiders offense. So I'm not sure what you could get for trading Devante Adams. And I know for a fact Devante is still him. Over his past 3 games, has target shares of 27%, 30%, 29%, air yard shares of 28%, 57%, and 35%. He is, as far as usage goes, and usage is a good way to determine a player's talent because it's a measure of how good they are relative to their teammates. He has a good teammate in Jacoby Myers. He's still Devante Adams. There's just no doubt that he's still capable of being the beginning and the end of his team's offense, even with Adams there, and still getting, or even with Jacoby Myers there, and still getting a fair cut of the team's offense. Adams is still him, man. And I think that's like the most operative point we have, in that he's still extremely talented getting the ball a ton. But 2, who is going to be trying to swoop in and buy the Devante Adams dip? Most people are afraid of coming into this offense. And they're right that it's not a good look for the team. But we've got an alpha number 1 receiver in our presence in Devante Adams, and we know that's not a surprise. This is not a blip. He's Devante Adams. He's going to get all the targets, and maybe we see some progression from Aiden. So I think right now, if you're moving on from Devante, you're probably selling low, and in a week or 2, he's going to have a 10-target, 8-catch, 105, and 2-touchdown game, and that will be the hope of someone you get in trade for him. So I think this is probably the worst time to move on from Devante Adams because he's still getting all the work and people are already valuing him as if he's completely fallen off. So as much as Devante's in a bad spot relative to where we drafted him, 2 months ago now. It's not a great run out for him, all things considered, but he's Devante Adams. He's getting all the work, and everyone knows how bad the offense is. I don't think the market's inefficient. I don't think we can beat the market in that sense. We only have one said, Pat said he's trying to get back in. Dynasty Superflex, pick the worst quarterback for me to trade away. Pick the worst of these guys, Stroud, Kyler, and Trevor Lawrence. It's not going to be Stroud for me because I think Stroud, worst, maybe. I think his distribution, despite an incredible start to the season, is still centered around not being a top 5 dynasty quarterback because we have a small sample on him. He wasn't the first overall pick. He was good, but not great prospect. However, I'm almost certainly higher on him than the market. So I think picking the worst quarterback is maybe not what I'm doing. Picking the most overvalued quarterback is more so sort of what I'm gearing for, because although the most likely outcome for Stroud is that he's good, but not great, that's the most likely outcome is that he's Trevor Lawrence, in that Trevor Lawrence is good. I think he's a fine quarterback. I think he's top 12, whatever, somewhere in that mix, somewhere between 10 and 15. But the more we see of Trevor Lawrence, the more I feel somewhat comfortable saying he's not going to be the next Burrow. He's not going to be the next Herbert. He's more likely to be the next Kirk Cousins. He's more likely to be the next Dak Prescott. And Stroud is still most likely to not be a top 5 quarterback. Nearly every quarterback is most likely to not be a top 5 quarterback. However, I think he's roughly just as good of odds of being a top 5 quarterback as is Trevor Lawrence. So among these 3 quarterbacks, if I'm selling one in Dynasty, it's probably Trevor Lawrence because I think he's good. I think he's a perfectly good quarterback. Do I think he'll be the next Joe Burrow? Every week that goes on, he looks more like Kirk Cousins, which is good. That's fine. but it's not great. And I think Stroud could be great, whereas I'm limiting my is he great expectations for Trevor Lawrence every week that passes. Pat, I know Denny is almost fully out on Trevor Lawrence. I think you and I are more middle of the road. He's fine, right? He's good. Not even fine. He is a good NFL quarterback who will probably be his team's starting quarterback for the next 5 years. But are we starting to lose the hope that I think I even said this exact quote, he could be the next Joe Burrow. Are we kind of out on the idea that he can take the leap this year?
Maybe this year, because the problem is it's just like too well-rounded of a roster. Travis Etienne has ascended too much. Doug Peterson, like you don't have to ask him twice when it comes to like playing balanced offense. And by the way, apologies for my internet cutting out. And
I spent like a minute, like 60 seconds 1 through 60, being sure it was me that cut out. So I'm just staring at the camera. Me and the chat are having a stare down. And eventually I get them to all be like, you're still alive with us. And you just look like a deer in headlights.
You were the deer in headlights. But it's weird. I think we're going to have better fantasy days ahead for Trevor Lawrence this season. But just that it's like too much of he's doing what they need in real life and more right now. And they just they want this like balanced offense. They're kind of going like stations. I don't know if they're still trying to like work in the new personnel, AKA Calvin Ridley. It seems like they can't quite figure out how they want to distribute targets between them. But I mean, quarterback is kind of collapsing as a position. Like where you're doing things like every week. Like is Geno Smith still top 12? Like is Baker Mayfield like the QB 14? And Trevor Lawrence's floor is still in like at least the QB 12 to like 16 range for me. And I think it's a little fluky that he's completing like almost 70% of his passes. I think the yards per attempt is down this year. I think we're going to see more touchdowns, though, for Trevor Lawrence the second half of the season. But, yeah, he's not taking the Burrow leap. That was a reasonable expectation, a Burrow leap for Trevor Lawrence, and that's not happening. And I have no idea what questions you've already answered. Have you answered Jerry's question about losing Dallas Goedert?
No, you should be good from here on down time-wise.
So who do we pick up? Because I wrote about this in my column today. It's pretty bleak. It's like Chigo Okonkwo season. It's like Gerald Everett season. It's always Gerald Everett season on the waiver wire. I think David Njoku would be my answer there, Kyle, where he had already like kind of stabilized the 4-catch, 40-yard floor, which might not sound amazing to you, but that's tight end one quality right now. And I would say his touchdown odds are kind of 50-50 every week now that Deshaun Watson is finally back. But who do you like from this group for Jerry, who's trying to make up for the loss of Dallas Goedert?
I think I might take Musgrave with Njoku as a close second, because Njoku's role has been like really hit or miss this year, especially with his ADOT. Like they've just been only targeting him on 2-yard dump offs, which is really hard to get home on. That's improved as of late, especially with 2 touchdowns in his past 2 games. And that does check out with his talent. Like he is a talent. Like he's such a good athlete. People forget that he absolutely nuked the combine, and early in his career, he seemed like that really good seam stretcher tight end. We haven't quite seen him take the next step. Probably won't see him take the next step. So I'll say for that reason, I think maybe Musgrave can take the next step. Maybe it doesn't happen this year, but he is basically back to playing all the snaps, running all the routes, and earning a 15 to 20% target share. So if we're splitting hairs, I'll take Musgrave over Njoku, but Njoku would have been my number 2 pick. So
only thing I'll say is I was already not dying to invest in the Packers passing game. Yeah. And now Aaron Jones is finally healthy, where they might just totally change the nature of this offense, because in theory, they're going to actually be able to run the ball again, maybe target the running back again. And I just wonder, Luke Musgrave has been percolating, though. You can't really ignore that. He's definitely in like the low end tight end one mix. But I think Njoku is going to be another guy who has a much better second half. And I think he's furnishing a floor, and the touchdowns won't be far behind. Jesse, I actually kind of like these kind of questions. Maybe the rest of the audience
does. That's fun.
Up 10 points going tonight and facing Keenan Allen. Do you drop no kicker roster? I think you definitely, if you're only up 10 points.
But it's such an interesting question. Is losing Josh Downs worth the points needed to get a win?
I would say yes.
Man. I do think at 4-4, you can't afford to go 4-5. You can, but you do not want to go 4-5. And if Josh Downs, he's obviously on your bench this week, means he's not super likely to make your starting lineup in the coming weeks. I don't want to give my opponents Josh Downs, but I still want a win more than I don't want my opponents to have Josh Downs.
Exactly. In a vacuum, you are not dropping Josh Downs as we wait for more information on his knee injury, but you can't you got to get that win. You just like you have to do something drastic. And if Josh Downs is the only option you have to draft, Jesse, unfortunately, you absolutely have to drop him. You've got to try to secure 5-4. It's tantalizingly close. It won't matter if Keenan Allen like finally does like a Keenan Allen game, like 9 catches, 87 yards.
But like, you could get 5 for 49. The Chargers score 2 rushing touchdowns and a passing touchdown to someone else, and their game is kind of wrapped up. Two field goals after that. It's 27-3 late in the third. Starters start coming off, and you're like, I needed that extra 0.1 points, and I didn't drop Josh Downs. I think Keenan Allen projects for more than 10 points in everything but standard. And I'm assuming you're not in a standard league, but I do think you need to secure that win at the cost of a good but a bench player on your roster.
Totally agree with the analysis there. Speaking of the Packers passing game, is Christian Watson droppable? Million end zone targets, million air yards. It never matters. He had 3 injuries yesterday. They said he's healthy today. He's a very frustrating player. You wouldn't consider dropping him in a 12-team league. In a 10-team league, though, is he getting expendable, Kyle?
Oh, yeah, he's getting expendable. I mean, he played a big chunk of the snaps last week. He stepped off the field a few times for like back, chest or something.
Too many different body parts. It was too many different body parts.
Everything, man. But still, he only earned 2 targets. I think it was like 8% target share. One of them was in the end zone, as they always are. Didn't catch it, as he never does. Yeah, he's very droppable in that his role, when healthy, is good. When healthy is a big stipulation. The role doesn't matter if the offense is terrible. And I don't know if he's healthy. I'm trying to hold on to him where I have him. But yeah, he is perfectly droppable in the way that like a few weeks ago, I'm like, oh, I think Jerry Jeudy's good. He hasn't put up a single point yet. Maybe I should stop thinking that. This one is a little more injury and offense based, but it's the same thing. Of no matter my view of the talent, at some point, we've got to score points here. Probably not scoring points on this offense.
Christian Watson, too, just to put my little addition onto it, he's the kind of player where in a vacuum, you would not be dropping Christian Watson. It's week 10, though. You're facing probably increasingly desperate roster decisions. Injuries are mounting. Maybe you're 5-5, like Jesse was earlier. You have to start making tough decisions. And you really, unless you're 7-3, 8-2, you have to start maximizing your roster for any given week, in my opinion. And not to to a desperate degree, but like if you were not like guaranteed to make the playoffs right now, you need to be maximizing your roster for any given week right now. And Christian Watson has not been a part of that for several weeks. And he's someone you don't want to drop, but a tough drop that probably makes sense. Michelle, a weekly viewer, needs to drop one player in 2 different leagues for, I believe, Kyler Murray. Drop Jerome Ford, Zach Moss, or Darrell Henderson from that group. Then we'll get to the second group, Kyle. Who do you drop between Jerry Ford, Moss, or Henderson?
I'd be fine with either Moss or Henderson. I think Henderson goes back mostly to the bench when Kyren comes off IR. That might be another few weeks. It seemed like Kyren was going to come off after his 4-week minimum.
It does sound that way.
I think we're at that now. Plus, they have the bye week. I think that's 4 weeks in total. 4 games, actually, it has to be. So I think he's coming back. I think you're probably fine dropping Henderson. And we've seen consistently the JT usage go up and up and up. Last week hit season highs in a lot of numbers. So Moss is fringe playable, but that might only last for 1 more week. So I'd probably go Zach Moss, assuming there's maybe a chance we get 1 more start from Henderson. If you want to hold Moss instead of Henderson, though, I think it's a coin flip. Neither of the guys are likely to be worth really holding on to it all within 2 weeks.
I think the switch flipped yesterday and Moss finally became droppable. And, maybe there's there's a dead cat bounce for Zach Moss. So 1 more game where he's inexplicably super heavily involved, but it seems like the tide has turned there. And I would say Kyren, I think, has 1 more game to sit. So I would keep Henderson just to see what the heck happens in week 11. And I would drop Moss now. Kyle, I was frozen. I was frozen.
I was asking chat because I was sure it was me.
I was the one who was frozen. Nicholas is wondering, should he trade away Devon Achane for Cooper Kupp? Extremely interesting trade proposal. We'll get to your second trade question in a second there. In a vacuum, Matthew Stafford probably coming back in week 11, by the way, Kyle. Devon Achane is, I think, almost for sure coming back in week 11. That might be famous last words after the Dolphins bye. Should you sell still high on Devon Achane and try to secure a wide receiver 1 in Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, I take Cooper Kupp here, unless my understanding or my vibes of the Stafford situation is that he wasn't actually that far off from playing this week. And then they obviously recognized they have the week 10 bye and said, maybe he could play through it. Maybe he couldn't. Let's never find out. Let's give him a week off. We don't need to find out, because finding out could mean that Brett Rippon plays 4 more games, and that guy cannot play 4 more games. I am fairly confident, 75-25, that Stafford comes back in week 11, and that once he comes back, Cooper Kupp is a top 6 wide receiver, fantasy wide receiver. Achane's like up there for a top 10 running back probably, but famous last words, his efficiency can't hold at 12 yards a carry. Should he be the most efficient running back by yards per carry in the NFL? Sure. Should that number sit somewhere between like 5 and 8? Probably yes. So I'm going to take Cooper Kupp here.
I'm going to ask you a devilish, unanswerable question. Who is more likely to get hurt again, Matthew Stafford or Devon Achane?
Stafford, because Stafford rolls his ankle in week 13 and they're 2-10, right? And they're like, dude, Stafford, call it a season, buddy. Yeah, whereas the Dolphins are going to be in the playoff contention. They're going to make the playoffs. So, of course, they'll be in the playoff contention until week 17.
So that is an interesting dimension there. But I agree. I'd probably just rather secure Kupp. The Dolphins, it's like a little bit different setup every single week. And I think they might reasonably decide, oh, yeah, Devon Achane, we were maybe using the 5'8" guy too much. And we got to try to limit his touches a little more. And should not be a 20 carry player. I feel like self-evidently he probably will not hold up under that. But 2 very valuable players. I think Kupp is probably a little safer. Trade away DeAndre Swift for Isaiah Pacheco and or Jahmyr Gibbs or James Conner.
Trade away Swift for Pacheco and Swift for Pacheco plus Gibbs / Conner. I mean, absolutely, yeah. And it's still Gibbs over Conner for me, even though I get that Gibbs probably getting his role scaled back. I just want to bet on that potential upside, and Pacheco fills in as the floor player that you're acquiring. To me, in my rest of season rankings, I don't think I have Pacheco and Swift that far apart, frankly. Swift is a really good player. He's not seen goal line work. That's self-evident. He's got the best goal line. Yeah, he's got the best goal line back in the NFL. That player just plays quarterback. He's not seeing a ton of red zone work either. Kenneth Gainwell gets some of the red zone work. So he's between the 20s back. He's really good at that. And he's drawing targets at a decent clip. But that's not that much different. It's Pacheco with a little less work in the red zone and a little more work through the air. I think they're similar-ish bets. So obviously take the Gibbs. To me, it's Gibbs over Conner, but Conner's not terrible.
You know what I always say about 2-for-1s is that I focus on the best player in the deal. And I think by the letter of the law, Swift is probably the best player in this deal.
Not by a ton, though.
But yeah, this is the 2-for-1 where the 2 is too much value to not give up the 1. And I definitely do make this trade. And I agree that I still have Gibbs ahead of Conner. We don't quite know what the Cardinals offense is going to look like with all the changes they have coming down the pipe for the second half. Josh wants to know T. Higgins or Christian Kirk rest of season. Pretty interesting question. T is finally healthy. Christian Kirk's floor won't go away. Also not providing ceiling. What do you tell Josh?
Give me T. Higgins, I think. I agree. Like you said, the Kirk floor not going anywhere, but the Kirk ceiling not existing. His ceiling is 10 catches for 105 and 1, but it takes so much to get him there because he has to have a 40-50% target share in a given game, whereas Higgins can probably also do that in a given game in a matchup where that deep outside threat is the best option for the Bengals offense. But even when it's not, he can get there based on 3 catches for 101 and 1 because he's so good at being that deep outside receiver. So I'll take Higgins. It is close. I think Kirk has proven to be a far more target worthy receiver versus Calvin Ridley than ADP thought in week 1. But I still want to go with Higgins.
I still want to go with Higgins too. And maybe worth monitoring. Chris Collinsworth was talking about during the game last night. Pretty big fall for Jamar Chase. And he said today they asked him about his back and his response was, "I'm alive." I found that interesting. So
yeah, their status on him is very, I'd say, uncertain. I mean, they basically said as much. Let me see, I've got the quote here. He said, Paul Denner, I believe it's his name, the athletics writer for the Bengals, said the back injury is worth monitoring. Chase said the back injury is worth monitoring. And he said Chase had a concerned tone to be certain. So, I mean, like we said, there's a lot of range of outcomes for this team. But Higgins without Chase, this trade is not even close. Even if that Higgins without Chase lasts for a week or 2 weeks, you're getting a top 5 fantasy receiver for those 2 weeks. And otherwise, they're close enough.
Even with Chase, I think Higgins is winning it. So
yep.
I totally agree there. SSX is getting his shots in tonight. 15% of the fab left. That's probably about normal for this time of year. Some people are probably down to 0. Thoughts on going down to 0 for either Keaton Mitchell or Noah Brown, or should you try to wait for one more killer app on the waiver wire? Because it always seems like that's the time of year we're at. No one else is going to come along. And someone always kind of does, but it's crunch time. We're trying to make the playoffs. Is it worth going to 0 for either Keaton or Noah Brown, Kyle?
I definitely wouldn't go to 0 for Noah Brown. I wouldn't even go to 0 for Keaton because I still think he's going to be, at best, the 1B to Gus Edwards because Gus has played really well. So if you had to make me choose one, it'd be Keaton, but I wouldn't do it on either. And if you think you might need that fab later, I'd truly just let someone else, especially for Noah Brown, enjoy spending your money on him. For Keaton, much more of a dang, wish I could get him, but I just don't have it in the budget.
Totally agree, especially because, like I said, you might not even be able to use him this week is the problem with Keaton Mitchell. So I don't think he's worth going to 0 for either. What about Josh Jacobs? Mr. MH has Aaron Jones and Jonathan Taylor, so you could trade Josh. I know it's tough to come up with recommendations. Are you looking to sell Josh Jacobs? Let's just begin there again. Finally got the touchdowns. It seems like Antonio Pierce is going to go back to basics. He definitely did that against the Giants. We got almost 30 Josh Jacobs carries. Are you feeling pretty good about Josh Jacobs maybe stabilizing as like a top 8 RB1, Kyle?
Yeah, top 8 might be a little tough because I don't have high expectations for this offense. But on the other hand, I did mention this when I was talking about the team, is that like everyone recognizes what's going on and that Aiden O'Connell's not very good. He's going to distribute the ball to the good players, but they're not going to score a lot of points. I don't know there's like an inefficiency that you can capitalize on the name brand value of Josh Jacobs, especially since he hasn't been that good this year. So for me, I'm holding on to Raiders just in the hopes that they get their ball to the best players and we work our way from there. And the trade market is only going to value them as such. I don't know if you can like sell high on them in the way that I was actually a little bit open to the idea of like, let's try and squeeze our last juice in the trade market out of getting rid of someone like Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison. Everyone recognizes what's going on here. So I don't think you can beat the market in that way.
That's a really good point. By the way, still, I feel like we're not any closer to knowing what's going on with Justin Jefferson. The Vikings are like playing an entire season every single week. The amount of drama the Vikings have, it is crazy. I am rooting for them in this. I really like Kevin O'Connell's demeanor, by the way. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if he's an amazing X's and O's coach, but he's not a bad one. He's just got a really good demeanor. I like Mr. Kevin O'Connell.
You like the cut of his jib.
I do. Mr. Ethan Moreno has got a fiendish question here. A better PPR asset rest of season. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery is, of course, coming back this week, Kyle.
Give me Bijan. I think the splits with and without David Montgomery were drastic for Gibbs. And we already had Dan Campbell come out and say it's going to be more of a committee. But, like, do I want the second half of this committee when the first half, Dave Montgomery was really good. Like he was legitimately a good running back when they were giving him 20 plus carries. I think we're looking at a dozen or so touches per week for Gibbs with Montgomery back in the lineup. Whereas Bijan, as much as his market share numbers weren't great, it's the inverse Kyle Pitts. You don't need a big market share of the Falcons backfield. As turns out, they run it a lot. Even the 1A gets the ball a ton. So I'll still take Bijan here, though it's kind of a testament to how both have fallen, frankly.
Do we think anything is going to change with Bijan, man? I mean, I don't. If it didn't change in the week where Drake London was out and they were changing quarterbacks, I just feel like we are stuck in this hell. I just think we are stuck in this. Like nothing is going to get Arthur Smith to adjust course. Every single week is 10 to 14 carries for Tyler Algier. It's probably more like 12 to 15 for Bijan Robinson, but he just strikes me as that he seems like a classic rhythm runner. They are not allowing him to get into rhythm. He's a big play threat, but they're not giving enough handles to hit like home runs. And I'm scared. I do think the touches floor is higher than it is for Jahmyr Gibbs. But Jahmyr Gibbs is in a much better offense. I feel like he's being put in more consistent position to make big plays. I have a lot of Bijan, so like I want this to happen. But yesterday, if they're not going to do it when they're changing quarterbacks and Drake London's out, man, like I just don't know what Art Smith's ever going to do with this guy. He's going to get fired too at the end of the year. But
yeah,
do you share that pessimism or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're locking Bijan in for 10 to 15 carries and 3 to 5 targets. None of them are coming near the red zone. He still might score because he's super electric. But I think that's that's a very similar outlook to what we had on Gibbs. Was like, they don't use Gibbs as a red zone option, but they didn't give him 10 to 15 carries. He was 5 to 10 carries and maybe 5 targets in a game with Dave Montgomery, but probably less. And they weren't coming in the red zone, like I said. So I think they're very sort of similar bets, except you're getting more care. You're just getting more work overall. It kind of masks how valueless the work is, because what we care about the most is that carry that comes to the 2-yard line. Somehow neither of these guys are getting that. Gibbs, it makes somewhat sense. Dave Montgomery's a good pounder between the tackles. It makes no sense to not do that with Bijan, but I think you're just getting the same role or the same workload for Bijan, but add in 3 carries, 4 carries, add in a target or 2 versus Gibbs. The offense is a little better. I mean, it's not a little better. It's way better for Gibbs, but he's not getting the same cut of the backfield when David Montgomery's back.
I agree with you. I do think Dan Campbell would be more likely to react to on-field events than Arthur Smith. And
that's
the on-field event was Jahmyr Gibbs, 30 touches, almost 200 yards. And where I could see maybe the Lions making David Montgomery a clear 1B. I don't think that's the most likely outcome.
Yeah, I'll give Dan Campbell more credit for being malleable, for saying, Gibbs is so explosive. We can't be giving David Montgomery 25 carries. Maybe they split him 15 down the middle, but we can't be giving him that same split where Gibbs doesn't exist. He's malleable. I think he's smart. Smarter than Arthur Smith in his talent evaluation of his own team. It seems unlikely that we get the full Tyler Algier just isn't it. Give Bijan 65-70% of carries. Not happening.
Not going to happen. Lindorphins said she didn't have a question. She does have a question. We're going to get to that. She just talked about the team she's in right. And talk about the bye week apocalypse. Kyle, do you know who's on bye this week off the top of your head?
It's the 2 Germany teams, plus obviously I see that it's the Eagles team and Rams, right?
Yes. So we are missing a healthy, hearty amount of fantasy.
Yeah, probably options. 3 of the top 5 to 6 offenses by points per game, I'd imagine. And then a Rams team that, while not putting up a ton of points, has given us breakout stars in Puka, in Kyron Williams, and then has given us Cooper Kupp the moment he stepped back onto the field. And
Lindorphins, her question was, who is a better start this week, Tommy or Danny DeVito, Kyle? And
Danny, man, Tommy is so bad.
I would take my shot on Danny this week for sure.
We talked about this in Slack. Like, they should try the Wildcat stuff. Like, apparently the Dolphins did that against the Patriots in like 2008 or something. The Browns did it with Josh Cribbs in one game, and both of them were upsets over the Steelers and then over the Patriots.
The Dolphins, though, that was like a supplement. They had a real quarterback for that game. The Josh Cribbs I don't know if they had a real quarterback.
They had a real quarterback for that game. He was just terrible.
Yeah, so they got to do something. They cannot be giving Tommy. He completed some passes yesterday.
That's great.
Nice. Michelle has a question. Second half a question. Drop one. Oh yeah, sorry, I missed that. Drop one. Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Warren. We're not going to drop Tony Pollard or Mostert.
Sickening.
It is sickening. I think I'm still just dropping Charbonnet, even though I have no clue what's going on with Kenneth Walker. He seems like he must not be anywhere close to 100% health. He's like barely.
But as long as he's out there, he's blocking. He's doing enough to block Charbonnet, but not doing enough to be Ken Walker circa week 2, 3, 4. Whereas Warren, he's actually out there enough to not be blocked. Of course, he's like kind of capped at RB20 numbers in a good week, in a week where he finds the end zone. But Charbonnet's cap is even lower than that. So,
Mr. Hugo Fontaine, Josh Jacobs, or Bijan Robinson, rest of the season for a team that's pretty much a lock to make the playoffs. Surely something has to change, Evelyn. I guess Hugo, you heard us already answering this, that we don't think so, but Jacobs or Bijan rest of season, Kyle?
Jacobs.
It's Jacobs. It's just the work is just too inarguable. He was bound for some positive regression.
It's
He
Jacobs.
is,
It's
it's
like
not
so
a good,
obviously Jacobs. I shouldn't have even hesitated.
He's going to start averaging over 4 yards per carry again, Josh Jacobs. And Antonio Pierce, he's going to Rick Bisaccia it. He's going back to basics. They're going to be running the hell out of the ball. Josh Jacobs, I think, should have a pretty good second half of the season. Another Raiders question from Mr. Chad. What do we make of Trey Tucker? Is he going to continue to get enough of a leash under the new regime, or is he just a dynasty upside guy? I believe he led the Raiders in receiving yesterday, Kyle. Trey Tucker.
Wouldn't surprise me. He had like a 50-yard catch, and with their team not being that great, 50 yards goes a long way.
It does.
But I mean, so last week he ran, or last week, this week still technically, he ran 9 routes, was targeted 3 times. Like 9 routes is nothing for this team. It was 1 more than Hunter Renfrow, who like was on the trade block for 18 months and literally no one picked him up from the team. They could have had him for a 6-7 swap. He, as much as I think he's like a good dynasty stash, or at least he should be on all dynasty rosters, he's running wide receiver 4 or 5 routes. And even if that route share does increase, they completely bench Hunter Renfrow. They don't play anymore 2 tight end. They don't use a fullback. How is he earning targets with Devante Adams and Jacoby Myers on the field?
Yeah, very good breakdown of him. We've got about 8 or 9, 10 minutes left, but running a little low on questions. So if you've been sitting on the fence about getting your question in, feel free to do so now. We've got someone who lost Dallas Goedert. Gerald Everett, I feel like every week in my initial waiver wire look ahead, he's always one of the players under 50% rostered. I always put him on my tight end list.
Now, why is that?
Yeah, just because my unwavering belief in his ability to catch 3 balls for 37 yards and maybe a touchdown. But Josh Palmer is on injured reserve. We're going to get our first look at the post-Josh Palmer offense tonight. Quentin Johnston seems like he's finally stepping into that void a little. Are finally enough players hurt, basically, for the Chargers, for Gerald Everett to maybe start catching more than 3 to 4 passes and maybe scoring a few more touchdowns, Kyle?
Probably not. I mean, early in the season, they had no interest in using him in a full-time role. Maybe now they get to it, but really they totally have the option at least to keep him at 55% of the routes and just run a lot more 2 tight end to get Donald Parham or Stone Smart on the field. I mean, they could use multiple running backs. Sure, maybe he gets up there, but also he's not a particularly strong target earner either. So I don't have a ton of faith that if they increase his routes, his efficiency wasn't great, doesn't come down even more. He's a viable ad off the wire, but like just take him or Cade Otton. To me, it's Cade Otton because he runs a lot of routes. Cade Otton's not particularly good, might not even be as good as Gerald Everett, but he's going to run nearly 2 times as many routes as Gerald Everett. And at some point, we have to go for the guy who is on the field. And Gerald Everett isn't really on the field.
You make a really good point that Gerald Everett has never been a target commander, by the way. He just is like, he's been the same thing his entire career.
Yep.
Ocean Deebs, interesting question. Hard to come up with people off the top. I'm going to look at my rankings, though. Trying to unload Dameon Pierce and Tyler Lockett. I feel like the answer is an RB2 with question marks is kind of where I'll start there, Kyle. Tyler Lockett's at a real low ebb in his value. Dameon Pierce, of course, his value has totally collapsed. I think you're just getting like a problematic RB2 where maybe a really good outcome would be Ramondre Stevenson. That's probably an unlikely outcome, though. Do you think that's unlikely? Maybe Jerome Ford. You're getting an RB2 that you're not going to be overjoyed to get, but you're basically trying to bank more touches. I think if you're selling low on players.
When you're looking at your rankings, are you looking at your weekly rankings?
Just my week 10 rankings.
Yeah. I just need a list. Give me the rundown of RB 13 through 16.
These are not ranked yet, by the way, in order for.
Oh, these are for your next week already, really?
These are for my next. I'm just looking at an unranked list yet, but I mean, you're in the Stevenson zone, Javonte Williams, Devin Singletary, maybe Gibbs, Chuba, Hunt, Ford, Brian Robinson. I think that's the kind of sandbox you're going to be playing in.
Javonte, maybe there's something you can get there because his role's been creeping up a lot lately. He saw nearly all of the carries, not last week as in this week, but 1 week ago. They're on bye this week, I believe. So maybe there's something you can get there because hasn't had a great season so far, hasn't looked quite as explosive, but the role is starting to match the talent that we think he has. And in turn, Pierce is offering you nothing. He's cuttable. I mean, he's literally, you can cut him. So if you can get something for him on the trade market, go for it.
I'm not sure. I wouldn't go quite that far. It's not like Devin Singletary did anything yesterday.
Sure.
But we'll see. I wouldn't. You can cut him. I would not cut him.
Cuttable, yeah. Cuttable. Not every roster should cut him.
I wouldn't cut Dameon Pierce just to cut Dameon Pierce. Months behind. I kind of like that username. Who is the RB1 in Chicago with Khalil Herbert? He's being his practice window's been open. It is a short week, which always makes things weird. If Khalil Herbert is active Thursday night against the Panthers, is he the RB1, Kyle?
Yeah, if he's active, it's him. If not, we actually saw the backfield return to being that of Deonta Foreman last week. It's not like a great team, so I'm not banking on that too much.
It is a great matchup.
Yeah. So I'll say if it's not Khalil Herbert active, then it's definitely Deonta Foreman, much to the chagrin of me having a ton of Roschon Johnson. Just not getting there.
Roschon just isn't happening, it seems like, where he might be the kind of player, he might need to like remake his body or something. He looks slow to me. He's not looking explosive. He seems like someone, it'll be very, very, very important offseason for Roschon Johnson. I mean, spoiler alert, a day 3 running back. So yeah, of course it's going to be important. Yeah. But Chad wants to know back the rest of season.
Devante, come on. We're not doing this, Devante.
Well, are we? I mean, are we sure we're not doing it? You sure about that? I think it's Devante, of course, but I've been thinking that for 5 to 6 weeks.
The recent weeks have been much better process-wise. Hashtag the process for Devante. Target shares of 27, 30, and 29%. Air yard shares 28, 57, and 35%. Has he gotten home on any of those? Let's not dig into the details too much. But also, that's a product of this terrible offense, and both of them play in this terrible offense.
This looks like a pretty clear trade win for Hugo, I think. Trading Jalen Hurts and Bijan. Oh, wait, no. He's trading? Okay, trading Hurts and Bijan for Jacobs, Trevor Lawrence, and Gabe. I think I would stand pat. Jalen Hurts is way too valuable. Even for a quarterback, I think Jalen Hurts is too valuable to make that deal.
Should I try and get Jalen?
Oh, try and get. Okay, yeah. He's trying to get Jalen Hurts and Bijan. I want the Jalen Hurts side is what I'm trying to say.
Me too. Yeah. Like Jalen, especially with the way quarterback is shaking out, where like I thought I could gain some ground on my opponents by having Kirk Cousins. He's going to throw for a bunch of yards. Anthony Richardson, he's going to rush all the time. Geno Smith getting destroyed every single week. I didn't draft Aaron Rodgers, but certainly someone was like, oh, he's going to revive. Every single mid-round quarterback is hurt to an insane degree. So your relative value on Jalen Hurts is so high. So yeah, I would take the Jalen Bijan side, like you said.
It's the hardest year to stream quarterback in a really long time. It's very bleak and getting bleaker this week. Wait till you see it. Duval Dan, he traded Josh Jacobs for Austin Eckler. Did he win the trade?
For sure did. For sure.
I mean, although it's been one game, Eckler, man, I don't know. I'm getting still kind of bad vibes at Eckler.
Wait, why?
He always when he's been healthy, they've only used him as like true Austin Eckler one time. Like he'd been stuck in like that 4 catch for 40 yard zone. I think that's over though. They need his targets so bad.
Yeah, I mean, he's got his first game of the year, 20 touches. His second game, I think second game comes back, 18 touches. The next game, 15. The next game, 22. He's got to be averaging something.
That's a little higher than I thought, because the receptions have been low. Was the main problem by his standards? They had been low until
4, 7, and 1. But hadn't had the big like last year. He had like some crazy receiving lines. Hadn't quite had that until I think it was a week ago. But yeah, it's Eckler. It's not clear.
Let's see. Best bet for tight end 1 production moving forward. Jake Ferguson, David Njoku, Trey McBride. We went through a little bit of this earlier. Trey McBride's a new name thrown into that group, though. Best bet.
Give me Trey McBride. I think this offense will start to really click with Kyler. Really click is like Kyler still has his flaws, but it's better than Josh Dobbs. Dude, I didn't watch the Browns game. Clayton Tune. 58 yards.
You didn't need to watch it. It was their fewest yards. This is one of my favorite stats of the week. It was the Cardinals' fewest yards since 1955. People know that the Cardinals moved from St. Louis to Phoenix in the 80s. That's somewhat common knowledge, even amongst younger football fans. Most younger football fans do not know that the Cardinals moved from Chicago to St. Louis in 1959. It was their fewest yards since they were the Chicago Cardinals, is what Clayton Tune did. So if you want to know just how bad they were, And it is funny that the sacrificial lamb theory was 100% correct. They just
100%.
clearly did not want Kyler Murray, understandably, making his season debut against Myles Garrett. And that was all it came down to.
I know. In my brain, I was like, Kyler seems very ready to play. 2 weeks of full practices, activated or designated to return weeks ago. This is every signal of a guy who should play. And in my heart, which is how I connected with the Cardinals franchise, I was like, they don't want to murder their maybe franchise quarterback or maybe giant trade blue chip piece. And as it turns out, they did not want to murder their maybe franchise quarterback, maybe blue chip trade piece. And that proved correct. And he would have gotten killed because the Browns are incredible.
Yeah, they did not care if Clayton Tune lived or died. Sorry, Lindor. I don't know. I was thinking Linda. I have no idea why. Lindor makes more sense. I will no longer call you she.
So is it Lindor, but then like Dolphins?
I think so. It must be a Francisco Lindor and a Dolphins fan.
Funny enough, I knew someone who would go to Akron Rubber Ducks games and shag foul balls and get him signed from Francisco Lindor when he was about to get called up for, at that time, the Indians and now Guardians.
That's a very Ohio story you just said there. We're almost out of time. Does Donovan Peoples-Jones take Josh Reynolds or Jameson Williams' job? If so, is he worth a waiver claim in a deep league? The deep threat role player is a staple of the Lions offense. Do you think they acquired DPJ to replace those guys, Kyle?
I think he's probably more so a hedge against Marvin Jones stepping away from the team for personal reasons. And I think that's still bad for Jameson Williams because guys like Marvin Jones, Josh Reynolds were playing ahead of him. We don't want to give the Lions more reasons to play guys ahead of Jameson, but I do think that's the role he showed up to fill. I wouldn't claim him probably even a deep league.
Final question here from Mr. Michael Caldwell. Another rest of season question. Jerry Jeudy or Quentin Johnston? Pretty interesting one. Maybe unanswerable, but it is an interesting one.
I guess it depends on your situation. If you're trying to think like who could really pop off in the playoffs, it's probably Quentin Johnston. I think we've seen what we're going to see from Jerry Jeudy. He's out there running a bunch of routes. He's not terrible, although there are probably even people that would qualm with that, and I would get it. So it depends what you need. Do you need, I have some bye weeks. I have the week 10 bye apocalypse. You want to hold Jerry Jeudy for that. If you don't really plan on starting either of these guys, just take the one who maybe finally earns a role. Last week, he looked all right in that role too.
I lied. We do have one more question. He's come back, Ocean, with a specific trade proposal. Michael Pittman and either Pierce or Moss for Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker is kind of a stranded, wounded asset right now. Pittman is maybe the most bankable player in that deal, but my gut instinct is to take a chance on Kenneth Walker, but I don't know what your gut instinct would be.
Same. Yep, that's it. You can just doing debits and credits, cross out Pierce and Moss. They're both like, maybe you can roster them. You certainly don't have to. So it's just Pittman for Walker for me. And maybe we don't get back to where we were in weeks 2, 3, 4 with Ken Walker, where he's getting nearly all the snaps, all that red zone work, and we're not seeing any of Zach Charbonnet. But I think even if we don't, the Seahawks are likely to rebound, and maybe it's a small loss, but there's a chance that it is a big win for you.
I can't help myself tonight. I hope you don't have anywhere to go, Kyle. I actually I have to go pick up dinner. But Western Goods wants to know, Saquon is one of the RBs. I think Nico Collins will be my flex there, Kyle. Who's the second RB? James Conner, David Montgomery. This is a tough group. Actually, Nico Collins might lose out to one of these running backs. Who are getting the 2 starts after Saquon Barkley, who remains a must start even with Danny DeVito under center?
It's David Montgomery is number 2 for me. Pending any like really bad quotes, like we don't think we can give him 5 touches in this game. I'm assuming he comes back and is not the 25 carry guy we saw. Probably 15 to 20 still if he's playing. So give me David Montgomery, Saquon, and I need a flex Nico.
Yeah, I think that felt right. Yeah, I don't know. Who was K9? I forget. Is that Kyler?
Kenneth Walker.
Is that Kenneth Walker? He's number 9?
Yeah. That's why he's so good.
Can they have real numbers, man? Like what? We used to be a society with these running back and these receivers.
Are the only acceptable running back numbers for you, I assume, in the 20s?
No, the only acceptable running back number is 22. Like every running back needs to just be number 22 until the end of time.
What about the extra running backs in the roster?
Doesn't matter. They're all 22. That way you know they're the running back. Kenneth Walker, Jalen Waddle, Evan Ingram, and a Hollywood Brown. For Bijan, Kupp, Andrews, and I think there's a lot more value inside too there. What do you think?
Agreed. Yeah.
You're giving up some good players, but the good players you are getting back are better. True final question, Mr. Jack Smith, the special counsel here. Trade DeAndre Swift and Jalen Waddle for Pacheco and Cup.
Yeah, because I think, like I said earlier, Swift and Pacheco are really close. Swift is a little bit ahead, but I don't think it's by any crazy amount. Cup's ahead of Waddle. And Waddle's good. Like, I actually don't think he's like a bad buy right now, especially like, let's hope he can get healthy because they have the bye week coming up. So does Cup, obviously. But just straight up Cup over Waddle. Cross your debits and credits on the other two and take the win.
I don't think that trade is like materially changing either team's odds, but there is just a little more value on side two. I agree with you there. Really good stuff from Kyle. Really good stuff from the audience tonight. Thank you so much for all your questions, for keeping Kyle and I going. Sorry, my internet dropped out. Super annoying. Sorry, Kyle didn't know if he was frozen or not. Having to crowdsource if he was frozen.
The chat got it though. All the ones in chat were give me a one in chat if you can hear what I'm saying. So they were on it. Good job.
Thank you so much for your participation. We will be back next week at 6 p.m. Eastern to answer your Week 11 waiver wire questions and just whatever is on your mind with fantasy football. Check out Kyle's waiver wire column live on the site right now. We'll be back podcast on Tuesday afternoon. So for Kyle, I'm Pat. Thanks for listening. We will be back later.